All right, welcome to our second lecture for our week one, starting of Python. It is June 9th, 2021. Welcome, friends. It's a fun one. It's a pretty simple one today. We're pretty easy this week. We're going to talk about some fun things, some kind of things I would just want to touch on that you might see maybe in an assignment solution, just that way you guys aren't confused, and really kind of going through just a couple things before we really ramp up next week. Next week, we're going to talk about object-oriented programming, and I believe we're going to introduce MySQL in the second part of that. So we're going to introduce our first database and looking at what a model is and how a database works. So that's really, really exciting. Just a little bit of housekeeping. You do have 2 discussion posts due this week. Again, it is 2 out of 3. You might see 3, that's fine. Just make sure you do 2 of them. There's no extra credit for doing 3 or anything like that. But make sure you at least do 2 of them. Again, just to reiterate, our rules have changed. So if you don't do 2 of them, there's no way to make them up. And if you miss, I think it's 3. If you miss 3, then or 4, one of those 2, then unfortunately you have to retake the stack. Our rules have changed, so please, please, please make sure you don't do that. They're all open now, so it's not a specific day you have to do it anymore. It's not Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. It's just any time between Monday and Sunday night. So please make sure, just go do them right now. They're both open. That's the worst thing to do. We don't want to do it. It's just a compliance thing that we have to do in order to be accredited. So that's not our rules, trust me. So make sure you do that. Just want to give you guys an update on assignments. You have 2 core assignments. As a reminder, again, we also changed the way we do assignments. You have 3 types. There's optional, there is practice, and then there's core. With the core, if you're wondering which ones are core, which ones are not, it is this guy right here. If you come to this page, and you go to the checklist, there's an entire thing that says core. Right here, right? This is your assignment checklist. I will be going in tomorrow and actually adding on the Learn platform. I'll be adding the word core next to all the assignments to help you guys out. But so like this one right here, functions basic 1 is a core assignment. I will, that's our first starting one. We're testing it to make sure I can do it. And then I will make sure that I update all that for you. So that way you can see that too. Now on the actual My Progress, you're not going to see that on the platform. I'm sorry. Okay. You're not going to see the core on My Progress, but you will see it A, in our assignment checklist, and then B, again, I will make sure that every assignment that is a core, I'm going to do this tomorrow, will have this core parentheses right here. That way you guys know, but it comes out to about 2 a week. Just as a reminder for that, you have to complete those 2 by Sunday. That still means I would encourage you to do the practice ones. That doesn't mean just don't do them. They are crucial to you even understanding these core assignments. But you have to do these 2 core assignments. That's what we're grading you off of, and just seeing if you're in compliance each week as well. Kind of like the discussion post. If you fall behind anything under 90%, you can go into academic probation. If you are below 60% or 60 to 90, you put on like a tracking, making sure that you're okay. 60 to 89%. So obviously there's only 2. So if you only do 1 of them, you go to that 50%, you're automatically on academic probation. Just as a reminder, now moving forward, if you have 3 academic probations, it is cause for kind of academic review. So make sure that you don't do any of that. Don't, it's pretty simple. There's 2 assignments this week. So make sure that you do them. Any questions on kind of the housekeeping discussion post / assignments?
Yeah, this is Nathan.
Hey, Nathan.
Hey, so I already got a little bit of a response back, but I responded to the discussion questions and I see my response, but before I remember seeing, a whole bunch of responses from different people. So does that mean my response got through, or should I send you?
Great question. Why don't you, I will check tomorrow. So how many have you done?
I've done all 3.
All 3. Okay, I will check tomorrow. I'm going to write a note right now on my phone. I'll check tomorrow, make sure that I see them. And if I don't, I'll just let you know. We can kind of go from there.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I know that you also had some issues last time. So
yeah, thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions, friends? Okay, well, we'll just kind of jump in. This is the section we're going to be covering. We're going to be finishing this section today. And again, next week, I do want to just really encourage you guys to read this stuff. At the end of this, you can see that kind of your end of week, I want you to read up to methods in the platform and then finish all of your core assignments, obviously. Methods is on this part, your object-oriented programming part. So we're going to be talking about what are classes and attributes and methods with a class. We're going to be starting that on Monday. That's what we're going to be talking about. So I feel like as a student, you will have a much better understanding if you kind of, as I'm teaching you, have some sort of understanding, or, you've kind of grazed through the material like, oh yeah, okay, I recognize that. I promise you will get much more out of the program if you do that, rather than if you just kind of come in and expect me to teach you everything about this, right? Like, or if it's not everything about this, but if it's the first time you're hearing it, it might be a little bit harder to grasp and comprehend. So that'd be my encouragement there. Cool. So we're going to be finishing this fundamental section, and we got some really fun things, some cool like data types that we're going to talk through and introduce as well. It's this thing called a tuple. We're going to talk about lists. We're going to talk about conditionals. We're going to be talking about conditional statements, for loops, kind of functions, declarations, default parameters. We're going to talk about, first off, we're going to talk about our composite data types, which are tuples, lists. We're going to talk about the slice operator, which is a cool, neat, quick thing to do, and you'll see it quite a bit in Python. And we're going to talk about dictionaries. And then again, we'll talk about all this other stuff down here. Like I said, it's going to be a pretty simple one today, but leave it a lot of room if there's any questions or confusion. Cool. So talking about tuples, I went ahead and just built out some code for us. That way we can kind of look and see what a tuple is, how it acts, and how it differs from a list. So a tuple, and this is all also on the platform right here. It talks about tuples. This talks about lists. I even took this first example for tuple, but then I kind of rewrote it for a list so we can see what we can do and what we can change. And the dictionary, so it talks about that right here for us. But a tuple is a composite data type where I can put basically a bunch of different types of data together. So here you can see I have this variable called dog that I created, and it is a tuple. You can see that a tuple is declared just by a parentheses. That's where it differs, right? Once it reads the parentheses, Python knows that it's not a list or a dictionary, that is of type tuple. So I here have Bruce. I just think like a name. Type is Cocker Spaniel. 10 is like the age maybe, and are they a good boy? Yes, of course they are. True. Super good. Cool. So there's some key attributes though of tuples. First off, they can contain mixed data types, meaning it doesn't have to be just all strings. It doesn't have to be all numbers or all Booleans. As you can see here, I've got a string, a number, a number, and a Boolean. That's really cool. The other kicker about tuples is this, is that a tuple, once declared, is immutable. It means it cannot change. You cannot redeclare it. You cannot reassign any sort of value to a tuple. Once you put in a tuple, you're done. That's all you can do, right? It is there. You cannot change it. So here, if we were to run this, it acts the same way, kind of like a list, or what you guys are used to called arrays, or it acts the same way. If I want to target this first piece, this Bruce, the way I would do that is I would say dog, and then I would give my brackets, but I give the position like we had whenever we had our arrays, right? This is position 0, this is position 1, position 2, and position 3. So if I want to say print dog 0, what it will do is it'll print the value at this position of my tuple, which we can all sit and kind of guess and say, okay, that will print Bruce. But when I want to say dog 3, right? So I want to target this position right here, this Boolean, and I want to set it equal to false, it will actually generate an error. And let's actually see what that looks like. I want to run that so that way we can actually see what that looks like. Cool. No, so if I go and I'm going to start my terminal here because it's bigger than that other one. So if I say Python, remember if we just say Python 3 or Python main.py, that will run this Python file in this project, which is where I'm currently at. If I say this, it will say type error tuple object does not support item assignment. Again, it's saying you cannot reassign a tuple. You cannot reassign a value within a tuple. Once you declare it, that is what it has to be. Any questions on tuples? Sorry, I'm trying to go to the chat. You guys, I have a million screens open, so if you guys have questions, please feel free to unmute. That way I don't have to keep going back to the chat. I guess if I could just do this. Oh, perfect. That's easier. Okay. Can you guys see the chat?
Without me having to use my imagination, what would be a really good application for a tuple?
That's a great question. And I kind of thought I knew that somebody was going to ask me that. So I did some research this morning. And because it's kind of an interesting thing, right? You think, well, why would anybody do that? Like, why would you lock yourself in? There's so many things that change. And what I gathered is there's a few things for that. A tuple is great for information you know is not going to change, right? So maybe your social security number or just some information you know. So like from a company perspective, maybe they have like a URL that's not going to change. So that's a great use for a tuple. But what's interesting is actually under the hood, because a tuple is a constant, and without getting too much into like how memory works, because tuple is a constant, right? It is, once it's declared, that's what it is. It takes up that space. It's never going to take up more. That space is never going to change. Because of that, it's very fast. If you're trying to get data in Python, if you have data that's not going to change, maybe you have like a, I don't know, something that you need to like call and retrieve, and you know that's not going to change. That's how it's going to be. It's wicked fast compared to our lists, because lists are what we call dynamic. That just means that it can change, and from memory perspective, it can change, which is kind of cool. Not necessarily like an API key, but you're kind of thinking the right way, right? So like when I even say print dog, right? Dog is located somewhere in memory, right? You can kind of think about it without getting too much into it. Kind of think about memory as like this. Oh, I don't know what I just did. I thought that was gonna be more. You kind of think about memory as like this, right? You got all these memory slots. That's for like the, okay, this is just a very simplistic way of thinking about memory. And you might say, and I'm not going to get too in depth about it, but you might say something like this, like when I declare dog, I want it to take up it, you know, because I have all this stuff, the way that memory works. So let's say it takes up 4 squares, right? My computer finds 4 consecutive squares together and says, okay, this is where I'm storing dog in memory. Cool. Now, what that means is once it's stored there, it's not going to change. We don't have to have it prepared to change and, you know, grow. What if this one was already taken up by cat, right? And if I needed to add something like a list, then now I have to find, you know, 5 consecutive in a row, and I have to change it. It gets kind of confusing. So that's what I mean by it's fast. It's retrieval. When I say dog 0 is wicked fast. We know it doesn't have to have extra space or anything like that. So that's what a tuple would be great for, is information you know is never going to change. Or if you're really kind of, again, do the same thing, if you have something that maybe you need to retrieve quicker, some sort of like machine learning or algorithm, and maybe there is some sort of information you know is not going to change in that, then you call that. Then just as your algorithm calls something, it will just be faster inherently than a dynamic list like what we have. Great question though. Anybody else have any questions on tuples? You won't see them a ton. You'll see them. You'll primarily use a list. Tuples are again, as you get out a little bit more, you might see them, but I would say a list is absolutely going to be much more common. Cool. So let's talk about lists. Now, a list is just a Python word for array, right? They operate the same way. What we have array in JavaScript, list is what it's called in Python. So it's just a syntax thing, right? In the same way that in English, you can say hello. In Spanish, you can say hola, right? Like they fundamentally do the same thing, but they act differently, they're spelled differently, something like that. So a list is just what you guys would recognize as an array. And so some kind of key attributes is they can also contain mixed data types. So it doesn't matter if you put numbers or, Booleans or strings, but they're also mutable, meaning I can change, right? If I want to, dog2 is not a great variable name. If I want to do this, right? And I run this code. What did I do? Oh, for that. So if I'm here and I'll redo it because that's silly. Okay. I was messing around with some code earlier. So here printed, again, you guys know how to print a list. Pretty simple. It's just like an array there. But the nice thing is you can change it. So if I want to change this from 19 to 10, I can absolutely do that. Super simple, super easy. Now, here's the really cool thing about lists and tuples. Any quick questions on lists? Somebody asked, how do I comment? It's just command and then the question mark / key. That's just you do, so like command. So this is for Mac. CMD plus that is to comment out, or Windows is control. Yeah. So that's how you comment something out. Yeah, of course. Okay. So any questions on lists? I mean, it's pretty straightforward. And again, you guys have used them quite a bit. Then we're going to talk about a slice operator, which is kind of a cool thing. Any questions? Okay. So the way we have now gone through, the way we've kind of gone through any sort of thing in a list is we have iterated through it, right? We've iterated through, like if I have this right here, the slice. Slice is a list of 0 through 10. I just did that. That way we had the position, kind of made it easier. But the way we would do that is we would kind of iterate for I in, range. If you guys have gotten to for loops, we're going to get there. But, kind of like the for var equals I, var I equals 0, X, Y, Z, right? We've done that. But there's this thing that Python has called a slice operator. And I think it's awesome. So the way it works is this. When I call this, slice is just referring to this right here. You don't actually, so like if this was pizza, I think I already called it pizza. I'm going to call Buffalo. I'm in Wyoming, so might as well, right? So if I say Buffalo, I don't want to confuse you guys. Buffalo is just a call to this list right here. So if I say Buffalo, then what I can do, instead of just printing like Buffalo 1, Buffalo 2, Buffalo 3, I can actually do what we call a slice operator. So what I can do is I can say Buffalo, and I can say, well, where do I want to start? What chunk do I want to start at? In this case, I want to start at position 1. And again, this is not this one. This could be 7, right? It's still starting here. It's just at the position. In the same way, whenever I just say print, well, I just said like 1, right? That's just the position of my list. So this is saying start at position 1 of my list, and I want you to get everything between this starting point but not including this point right here, which is 5, right? So this will print 7, 2, 3, 4. It'll print that entire chunk. So if I do that, save, make sure, yep, nope. I want to So if I run this, let me get rid of this guy. Bring this up a little bit. Does it help it being magnified, or is it bad? Okay, cool. Great. Cool. So now if I run this, you see that I get 19 because I did not save. Why is it doing that? Oh, I forgot to do this one too. Wasn't it? Oh, I did that one. Whoops, I guess. Cool. So now if I run this, you see I get 7, 2, 3, 4, which is pretty cool. I didn't have to iterate. I didn't have to do some sort of conditional. All I had to do was give my slice operator, and it basically is the position of your list you want to start at. You use this colon and then the one up to but not including this position. But what if I didn't want to have to, there's like a faster way to do it. So what I could actually do is if I knew I wanted to start at the beginning, all I would have to do is something like this, where I say slice, I don't have anything in that position at the beginning. If I don't have anything at the position at the beginning, that will automatically by default start at the first position. And then I just say that's where I want to end. So this one will print 0, 7, 2, 3, which is a pretty cool little thing. So if I come here and I go to terminal, maybe terminal. Oh, hell. Okay. Python of that, not Python. Maybe it's not scriptable. Oh, sorry. I forgot I changed that to Buffalo. Cool. So now it does the first one, 7, 2, 3. I can do the other thing as well, right? If I know that I want to get everything at the end, but I want to start maybe in the middle, or I know exactly what position I want to start at, I could say, I want to start at slice. No, not slice, Buffalo. Six, it'll start at position 6, and then it'll give me everything towards the end. So if I run this, save it, run it. So it gives me 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Any questions on this? I'm gonna try something. I don't know if this will work. Oops, I want to try the length of Buffalo. I wonder if this is going to get me the middle position. Let's try it. Think it's going to work? I'm going to have this all in. Let's see. Let's try both ways. So what I'm saying is I want to go get the length. I want to get half. I just want to say I want half of it and the rest, the back half, the last 50%. Let's see if this works actually. I don't know, guys. Full send. This is how you get good at coding. You just figure it out. Nope, it did not work. Slice thing. Must be integers or none. So, fun fact, now you cannot use a formula within a slice. It has to be a integer. Look, we all learned something. Any questions on slice? The slice operator?
Can you slice more than once? Like, could I have a bunch of colons in there and grab
It would have to be
different
multiple
ranges?
slices.
Okay.
It have to be multiple slices. But you totally could. I
What if
mean,
you
as
rounded that instead? Because you had an odd number, so it would have come back as 3.5 or 0.5
No, but it's saying,
when you did
oh,
that divided by 2.
so math.floor. Ooh, let's try that. I love that idea.
Or just
said-
round len or something like that. Because yeah, you don't have an
Yeah.
even number of indexes.
Let's see. I mean, there's a simpler way before we even try that. See if that will work. Let's add another number. I should have 10 though, right? Oh, that's 5. Yeah. All right, let's try that code again. So it was what? Length of buffalo. Divided by 2. The back half. Let's see. That's a great point. No, still didn't work.
What will happen if you put in a variable, then you perform that action, then you put it in there instead?
Let's try it. I love the curiosity, guys. Yeah, that worked perfectly fine.
So
So then, I'm just wondering if maybe I didn't buffalo. Length of buffalo divided by 2. Let's see if that works. Maybe that extra parentheses is what killed me. No.
I think Buffalo's 11 values long. So you're getting 5.5.
But it didn't, I just added 1. So the last one should have worked too.
Oh,
Let's see this. Buffalo, let's see what it's giving me back. 5 by 2. Let's comment this one out. God, I love the curiosity. So it's giving me 6. So what if I did this? Okay, you guys ready?
Oh, but it's because of the 0.0. You need to like do the 2 int or something like that.
Yeah, so then what I can say is I can typecast, which we learned about, and say I want this value. It's not liking that. It's saying int, integer, base, convert a number or string to an integer. Oh, wait.
I think wouldn't you need that closing print after the 2?
After the 2. Oh, no, it needs to be like this. The closing print. What do you mean? So I'm
You have
trying
to
to.
You have to
encapsulate the
include-
2.
Oh,
Yeah, the whole int function. Needs
no,
to be
because
its
I
own
want
thing.
to. I want to do because it worked. So I want the length of buffalo. Oh yeah, let's try that. Doesn't like it so. Illegal target for annotation. Buffalo list. Length of buffalo. BUFFALO divided by 2. We just did this. So I did 6. So that in theory should work. Let's just send it and try it. Invalid syntax. That's not true. So that whole thing should be 6. So it should just really look like this, right? That's what we're trying to get. I mean, I guess I could always say this, right?
aren't you missing Buffalo before the square bracket?
Fran. Oh yeah, that was it. Yeah, because I didn't assign. That was it. I deleted it like a silly nilly. Hey, look at us, guys. Let's go. So if anybody wanted to know what was happening, I wanted to get half of this, the back half, right? And so what we did is we realized what we have is a built-in function called length. And we use this whenever we used our JavaScript arrays as well. It was .length. This one's just len. This gets you the length of whatever list you pass through, which is Buffalo. Now we were saying we wanted that divided by 2, because if we had the length, right, and we divided it by 2, that would give us our middle point. Now, the interesting thing, though, is when we did that, it came back as a float, which we went over last class. That is a decimal. That was 6.0. And so what happened was it's saying, well, a slice can only take in a full integer, so like a whole number, right? Which Python knows as an integer, not a float. So what we did as a workaround is we typecast the value, which we now know is 6.0, right? We typecast that to an int, said, well, that value now just make it type int, which makes it 6 evenly, just 6. And so now Buffalo of all this is the same thing as saying this. But if Buffalo ever changes, right? So if it, right? Buffalo ever changes, it will still work, which is kind of cool. So now if I run this, it gives me 7, 8, 9, 10, 13, 56. Hey, look at us. Any questions on what we've done?
I forgot you could do the double/divide and you don't have to do the typecasting. Somebody pointed that out to me the other day.
So like this. Let's try it. And then I'm done with my tangent, but that was sick. Let's try to do this. Okay, so for here, good job, John. Yeah. So if you wanted even a quicker fix, the normal division will give you a float, but if you want it to be an integer, you do the double side. Hey, this is all great. This is really, Jeremy, you're right. A lot of smart and inquisitive people in this cohort, which just makes it really fun. Cool. I had not at all any desire to do that, or like plan to do that, but this is sick. Okay. Any questions on what we just did with slice operator or just slice operator in general? Any questions there? Jordan, you asked, it has to be an integer, is why it has an int in front. Yes, so slice operators can only have actual integers here. And again, that was a float, meaning that it had a decimal, it was 6.0. And so what we did is, first we typecast, but now what we could actually do, John pointed out, which is great, do this double division, oh my gosh, double division sign. And then that will actually give us an integer back already. Yeah, Nathan, that was neat. That was awesome. Yeah, that is really cool. That's a really good little tidbit to know. Slices are a fun thing. You'll see it quite often. You'll see it in some of our assignment like solutions, but it's just a really simple thing if you wanted to get, I know this is week 1, but in the black belt, I might say something like, hey, get me the 3 most recent or the 3 oldest blanks, right? And so if that's a list of dates, well, the way we might get, the last 3 would be the length of Buffalo minus 3, right? Something like that. I'm just giving you black belt stuff. Already week 1, we're doing it, we're coming in. John asked, does slice come into play with better sorting? I'm not sure. It's a great question. Nothing off the top of my head, but possibly. I don't know. Great question. Cool. So let's move on. This is something that should be familiar with you guys. It's just what Python calls a dictionary is what JavaScript calls an object, right? So you guys have seen this before. An object has some different key attributes than it does like a list or a tuple, but it goes by a key value pair, because up here we created our dog, right? And it had Bruce, Cocker Spaniel, 10, true, right? And we said that Bruce was the name, Cocker Spaniel was the type, 10 was the age, and true was, is a good boy or not. Well, it's kind of hard if I want to target, what a name is. If I don't know, maybe it's the first one of the list, X, Y, Z. So what we came up with, and you're going to use these a ton, is just a dictionary. That is a key value pair. This will be a crucial piece of Python when we get to our Django and being able to see stuff and render stuff from the back end to the front end. You're going to use dictionaries like it's nobody's business. You'll use these all the time. So make sure that you do kind of pay attention and get to know them. So the way it works is this. You've got this pizza. Now, I actually like to write my dictionaries like this. It doesn't make it better. It does not make it more efficient. But in my opinion, it makes it much easier to read instead of having this long, list of stuff. So the way it works is you've got your key, and then it's got a value. Again, this is the key value pairs we went through with objects in JavaScript. Again, Python just calls it dictionaries, but it acts the exact same way. So here I created pizza. I was pretty hungry this morning, so I created pizza. Each pizza has a style, has slices, has slice size, 8 inches. I was just, shooting for stuff. I don't know. Had ingredients. Now a dictionary can have a value of any data type, including a list or a tuple if we want it, or even another dictionary. That could also work too. And then of delicious is true, right? That's a Boolean. So somebody said that this is giving them CSS PTSD. I fully get it, but it does look nicer. And it's a little bit easier to understand once you get to you're going to have something called context when you get to Django. And you'll be wanting to do it this way because it's just much easier to read and it's better code, right? We want to write good code because let's say that, we're not the only ones writing our code base at a company. Right now, you might be the only one seeing your code and you might think oh, this makes sense to me, but we want to make it to where anybody can come pick up our code. It makes sense and we be good developers. So here's my key style, value New York. I can target that if I want it in the same way that I can do this, right? I can say print pizza and then the key. If I say pizza, which is the dictionary name, and I give the key, what that will return to me actually is the value. So it actually returned this entire list, right? So if I did this, print pizza, let me make sure I'm not printing my Buffalo thing anymore. Okay. So here, if I bring this up a little bit for us, there we go. And I say run. That didn't save. Okay. If you guys have never tried this, then you absolutely should. I'm from New Mexico. Green chili is a real thing, and it slaps real hard. Best pizza I've ever had was a New York style at this place called Slice Parlor in New Mexico. I've never been to New York, so I can't say that's that good. I've been to Chicago. Deep dish is basically lasagna. Changed my mind. But having goat cheese, bacon, and green chili, woof. It's the best thing you'll ever have in your entire life. But you can see that I can target in my dictionary, I can target this way. John asked, can you use dot notation as well? Well, let's look. Here we have this, we've got our dictionary, but yes, you can. Let me see if something else has it. I know that it's on the platform somewhere, but you can, and we're gonna get really into dot notation next week when we start going to our, maybe it is in the OOP. Like when we get to OOP, you'll start seeing that we will primarily be using dot notation. And when we get to our classes, we're going to be using dot notation. We're going to have these classes called users. That's going to have some sort of like user dot email or Guido dot name. But we'll get there. But to answer your question, John, yeah, you can. So looking at these again, you can do some really cool things with this. There's one thing that's great is you can actually, if you just said something like this, right? Pizza key would reorder. Now, if I'm looking at this I don't have a key of would reorder equals true. But with Python, what I can actually do, if I do this, it will actually create that key for me. So whenever I printed, if I were to say, you know, print I don't know if I want to put space in between there. I'm just going to call this reorder. If I do this, you should see true. But I didn't have it, but when I do this, it creates it, it looks and says, oh, that's not there. I'm going to go ahead and create it and add that to this dictionary. Nathan asks, so if we move the key value pair to another location in the dictionary, will we always get the value stored in that key? Whereas if we call the position, it will call whatever happens to be at that position. No, it'll call whatever is that key. So it will look through the entire dictionary for that key. Once it finds it, it will give you that value. So it's not going to say, like, if I were to change style or whatever, that's not going to do anything. Like if I were to swap these two, it's not going to now just think every time I say slices, it say New York. It'll find that key every single time, and then it will give you the value there.
Right. Sorry, I kind of mixed ideas in the middle of my
Okay.
sentence. But
Yeah.
essentially, yeah, the key, no matter where you put it in the dictionary, as long as you call the key, it always gets the value that's matched with that key. So
Correct.
if we call the position of where that used to be, you'll get something different because
Well, with a
right?
dictionary, you don't call the position, you call the key.
Okay. So
So you
can
see
you call a
here,
position?
well, you see here, I call ingredients 1, but that is because it is a list. So it is the
Within.
bacon in my ingredients, because in my ingredients, I know that that's a list and I want to call something specific in there. Therefore, that's where that comes. But like, could I say pizza 1? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, but would that just create a new key?
Let's see. I don't think so. I don't think that'll work. Yeah. So because it's saying a key error, that's not a key. You didn't give me a key. You just gave me a number. So again, with lists,
Okay.
we can target by the number, like the position of our list. With a dictionary, we target by the key. That is what we do. In the same way, I couldn't, I don't have keys in the list. I couldn't just say like first or something. I have to say 1. So yeah. Good question though. Any questions on this?
Could you technically turn that ingredients array into a dictionary of its own and call it bacon? That way you could say print pizza, ingredients, bacon. And it would go find it.
Yeah.
Like you can have dictionaries inside of dictionaries
absolutely.
as deep as you want.
Yeah, so you can kind of think about like you might have like a user. This is a very real world thing, right? Where you have name equals Will, age equals 29. Oops. Address. Well, I can actually put my address, but my address is some sort of dictionary. For inside there, I've got a city. I'm in Jackson Hole, so I'm just going to say Jackson Hole. State. Wyoming, something like that. So you can absolutely, so then whenever I'm calling this, if I say user of address of city, it will give me this guy right here. So if I were to say, let's see it, let's say print user address city, should print Jackson Hole. I'm not printing anything, let's save it. Bring this up a little bit for us. Jackson Hole. And within that, you could have a dictionary, right? And then within that, and you would just keep doing it that way.
So you can use like a position, like say address is 0, 1, 2 is 2, like array 2, and then the city will be inside like a 1. You can't do that at all.
No, because this is a dictionary. You cannot
have to
target
put-
that way.
Okay.
Mhm. If it was like this is a list, right? Or if that was a tuple, you could say something like this. Ingredients 1, right? Because that's how we target that.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, so sorry, John. This would be for a class, not a dictionary. Sorry, I got confused there. So no, you cannot use dot notation with a dictionary, but when we get to classes, that is how you will do it.
Okay, I thought we were able to do it in JavaScript, and that's why I was wondering, but maybe I missed something.
Yeah, nope. And well, I would have to go back and look at JavaScript. But here, yeah, when we use classes, when we get to object-oriented programming, yeah, you'll absolutely use dot notation. That's going to be a big portion of next week. But here for a dictionary, we cannot. Because it's an attribute. So the dot will say that, oh, this is an attribute of this object, which I know sounds confusing because it's object-oriented programming. But a dictionary is different than an object in Python. I know that sounds silly because JavaScript was objects and dictionaries, but they are different. Great question, though. Cool. Cool. The only things I kind of wanted to talk about, and again, these are pretty simple, is for loop syntax, functions and declaration with default parameters if we wanted, and then conditional statements. So looking at a for loop, let me move this guy. I wish I could move this. Not that. Sorry, my zoom bar at the top. Oh, I found out how to do it. Okay. So looking at this, okay, we've done this. It's good to go. And I'll also post all this to GitHub for you guys, and then I'll show you how to do it again at the end of this. That way you guys can get used to posting to GitHub. So for our for loops, you guys probably recall, not probably, you definitely recall, if you're here, you know how to do for loops, where you do for, and then you would say var I equals 0, you know, I is less than a rate out length, whatever that was, or 10, or whatever that is. Now what you do here is you say for x, and x again, it could be I. If you wanted to use I, that's fine. For some reason in Python, x is really popular, and in JavaScript, I is really popular for an iterator. Don't know why, that's just true, but it could be unicorn if you want it, for unicorn in range. But it's a little bit easier. You don't have to do that variable declaration. You don't have to do all kinds of stuff. What you can just say is for x in range, and then you can give 3 numbers. This first number is where you want to start. This this middle number, again, kind of like, not kind of, exactly like our JavaScript, is what is the condition you want it to go until, right? Until this is no longer true. And then this is how much you want to iterate by. Now, what's cool about this is, let's say we always know we want to iterate through an entire list, right? We want to go up by 1, we want to have every single piece, and we want to iterate through the entire thing. Well, there's a couple of different ways I can write it. I can write all 3 numbers, or if I know that I'm always going to iterate by 1, but let's say I wanted to start somewhere else. I'm going to start here. What I could do is I could say for x in range 7, 10. What this will do is this will start me at 7. It'll go up till 10, but because I didn't put a 3rd number, by default, it automatically assumes that I'm going to go up by 1, which is cool. Now, one thing to know, if you want to iterate by anything other than 1, then you have to do all 3. But if you want to, iterate by 1, then you can go to 2. Now, let's say we did want to go through the entire thing. We know we want to go through the entire thing. Then what I can do, and I want to start at the beginning, and I want to go through all of them up by 1, then I actually don't even have to put the 0. If I know that that's true, I'm going to start at 0, and I want to go up by 1, and I want to end at 10, I can actually just say for x in range, and then 10. This is my conditional when I want it to stop, which is kind of neat. So that's pretty cool. Now, what we might be used to is where, we had that offload. I might be used to saying something like this, right? And this will just say, okay, stop whenever you get to the length of the list in Buffalo. But what Python allows me to do, if I'm looking at my for loops, what it'll actually allow me to do, instead of having to say for X in range, I actually can just say this. I can say I can say X or V or whatever I want in whatever that list is. And by default, it will automatically do the length of that list. So if we're coming back to Buffalo, I can actually say for X in Buffalo. And this will iterate through the entire list of Buffalo until the end of Buffalo. And it'll print X, whatever that is, which is all those numbers. So if I let this go, right, and I bring up my terminal. Then it will do 0, 7, blah, 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 all the way to 56. So it'll go towards the end of my list and then it's done. It's a really quick thing. So you might see it say something like for blank in my list. And that is a quick way to iterate through lists. Before I get to dictionaries, is there any kind of questions or confusion on this at all?
On the for loops in Python, is that inclusive? Like if you just put a 10, are you going to get 0 through 9 or are you going to get 0 through 10?
I believe
It's not a less
up
than or
to, but
equals
not
to, or-
including. I think it's up
Okay.
to, but not including. So let's
Is
see.
there an easy way to do up to and including aside from just adding an extra digit?
I don't know. That's a great question. Let me see.
Add the one on the end of it. Whole thing.
Yeah, so it's up to include. Let's say, let's try something like, here's our little inquisitive group.
Because I noticed like even in some of the solution examples for the assignments, like if it said go to 10, the code had 11. I just didn't know if there was
Yeah.
a better way to do that.
So it looks like gives you loads of options doing such a situation. Test input. I don't know, let me get back to you on that because I mean, this idea of like this list would be that, but I don't know the actual number portion. Up to and including integer Python for loop. Let's see. I'm gonna give him maybe 2 more minutes and then we're. Yeah, I don't know. That's a great question. I don't. The maximum value in range is n+1 to make I equal. Let's try n+10. No, it didn't work. I don't know, John. It's a great question. You got some really good questions there. I don't know.
Hey, what if you add 1 to 10?
You mean +1?
Yeah, or 11. That will still end up.
Well, yeah, that's what we're saying is you can do this and that's fine, but how do you do it without having to say like 11? How do you just do it with this? Like how do I do
Yeah,
it?
and it may just have to be that you do n+1 and then you would use your, because I mean, really, how often are you going to hard code how many times you're going
Yeah.
to iterate?
That's
I mean,
yeah,
that,
and you're gonna
that
do
middle number
a
is
lot
most
more.
likely going to be a variable.
Yeah, and that's when you would do this, right? For X and Buffalo. And that's going to be your iteration to the entire thing.
So, well, that will give you the value in Buffalo. What if you wanted the index of the value inside Buffalo? Just the
What do you
index,
mean?
not the value of it.
This is.
Oh, that's Oh, okay.
Yeah, so if I wanted the actual value, let's say something like
Oh,
this.
yeah, I see.
Yeah, I could see how that'd be confusing. Yeah, because remember Buffalo, we had 56 at the end.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is just giving me the indices. If I were to do this, that gives me 0, 1. Oh, wait. Oh, I didn't save. Oh, I didn't. It's silly. Now if I, there, gives me everything.
So yeah, I just give you the value. I say that.
Mm-hmm. So the Buffalo.
Mhm.
I'm wondering, what does that give me? You guys are making me be really curious today, and I like it. Yeah,
So
that
maybe
gives
you
me the
can,
same
for the range, maybe you can do for the ending item, do the length of it +1.
For the length of 10 plus 1.
No, length of your list +1. So Lynn,
So
Buffalo.
if we
+1.
have a list, then we're good to go. What John was asking is if you actually just have a number, how do you up to and include just 10? So not the actual list itself. Because if we just do this
Right.
by Python, it'll automatically do it like that.
Yeah, because like I've got some like random algorithm stuff that I've got that says like output this up to and including X.
Yeah. I don't know. Let me get back to you on that. Great question. Usually we just use something like this, but yeah, let me unless you stored, I mean, you could also just store whatever up to and including X. You did. Oh. Yeah, let me get back to you on that. Okay. Now, there's a couple of ways, and we're getting kind of close to time. There's a couple of ways that we can iterate through a dictionary. And that's kind of the end of my code here, but we can bring it over. So what I can do is I can say, here I have this dictionary, right? And I can say 4K in my dictionary, which is very similar to this, right? The way we did it with our list. Now, every time it does that, K represents the key. So for every K we have, it represents the key. And so then my output is that key, right? 4K in my dictionary, then language. So this is printing all my, all just my keys. If I wanted actual value inside of that, what I can say is 4K in my dictionary. I want to print, and then I say, I want to print my dictionary's value at that key, which that is what my dict of K is, right? So when the first one is name, it'll print out Noel. And then it iterates through the next one. Now K equals language. So then it'll print out Python, Noel, Python. So that's a way that we can.
One value, I mean, one key. Let's say you just want.
Well, then you would just target the key like we did whenever we did the dictionaries. You would just say my dict of name, right?
Oh.
Like I would just say, like how we had up here. Remember how I just said ingredients?
Oh, just.
Pizza. So you just give the key name and it gives that value. Yeah. Now, what I can also do is there's some built-in methods with dictionaries that allows us to iterate through them, and we can actually have our keys and our values iterate together if we wanted. So here, there's a couple ways to iterate just through our keys, and here's just through our values. You just add on for key in, let's say, capitals, dot keys, right? And so that is, let's capitals is a list, and then it has this dot key. So that's just going to say, or sorry, dictionary. That's just going to iterate through all of the keys in my dictionary. Here is going to iterate through all the values. Now I can also do something like a dot items, and that's going to give me all of the keys and the values for that dictionary. So like in this example, if I just wanted to print the key, I would just run the dot keys, and that's just going to iterate only through the keys. And then if I want it, which is very similar to this guy right here, right? Now, if I just wanted all the values, it's going to iterate through all the values. I can run this dot values, which that one's a little bit more useful than this dot keys, because dot keys can be accomplished by doing this exact same thing. So it's kind of silly. But what's really important is these two right here. Because when we get to dot values, when we get to validations with Python, we're going to use dot values when we have errors, right? If there's errors, I want the values. So we're going to use this dot values a lot. And we're also going to use dot items. Items is going to give us both the keys and the values. So let's say our user's filling out a form, and at the form part where it says first name, there's an error, right? It's not 3 characters long. Well, then I can say, hey, at the part of first name, your first name must be larger than 3, right? Your first name was whatever the value is, it must be larger than 3, right? It was 2 characters, must be larger than 3. So that's where this for values and items comes in when we're iterating through a dictionary. Again, these two are really going to come in handy. Keys you might use occasionally, but again, you can do this same thing and it accomplishes the same thing. Which is kind of cool. Any questions on iterating through a dictionary? Cool. So I guess John, this is where yours would come in. You would use a while loop, kind of just a simple thing. Instead of using a for loop, you would just use a while loop for your up to and equal to 10. So what you could do is you can use something called a while loop. Now we touched on those, or it was touched on in JavaScript, but it's similar to a for loop, right? It's just an iteration tool that we can use. But one of the big things is there's some kind of built-in things that a for loop has that you have to do on your own with a while loop. Now with that, it is something like this, right? I have to declare my variable before I just call a variable. This one will declare count right here, set it equal to 0. I have to actually do that for a while loop. I have to do that ahead of time. I give my condition. Well, 0 is less than 5, which is what that's built in, right? It's already doing it. I don't have to do that. And then I can print the same thing, but one big important thing. If you don't hear anything else tonight, I hope you hear a lot of other things tonight, but hear this. If you ever do a while loop, make sure you have a counter or something increasing/decreasing, right? Decreasing if you're saying, if it's greater than 5, or increasing if it's less than. If you don't do this, you're going to put your computer in an infinity loop, right? Because this while loop will continue to run as long as this condition is true. But if you never change the condition, this condition will always be true. Therefore, it will always print this, and your computer will just keep going and keep going and keep going until you hit Stack Overflow, or your computer just freezes and stops. So when you use a while loop, you have to declare. You have to actually give the condition itself, not just built in like a for loop, and then make sure you do have a counter. Any questions on a while loop?
Is it commonly used though? Like
While
while
loops? Can be, yeah. Yeah, there's different things. Yeah, so like one example I had that could happen is you can set so in cloud computing, you have these serverless functions, right? And you can even set a timer on when this function is going to run. And so you can create a function that basically every day it's going to run one time or something of like that nature. And maybe it's saying like, while, and you're going to make it run for 1 minute, something like that. And it's going to check, maybe it's stock markets. And you say, while GameStop is less than X amount, buy GameStop. And it'll go and it'll buy, and then it'll buy, and then it'll buy for that minute, and then it's done, right? So it continues to buy while that condition is true. A while loop is used when you don't know when the end is going to be. Like you don't know when that's going to happen necessarily. That is where a while loop. So this one is kind of a weird example because you're like, oh, I know that this is going to end when it's less than 5. But basically, when you can say like, while GameStop would be a great example, while GameStop stock is less than $350, you don't know when that is going to end, right? You don't know if GameStop will ever get back up to $350. You don't know if it'll ever get lower, whatever, right? You don't know that. So that's where a while loop would come in. But for what we're doing, you're not really going to use while loops. You're going to predominantly iterate through using a for loop. And for loops are wildly popular. And a lot of your technical interviews, you'll use more for loops than a while loop. But I think when you get to like singly linked lists, you might use a while loop. Cool. Any questions on while loops?
I do have a question. So that still doesn't. Couldn't you just put a variable in the range? Because I'm just looking at this and I'm seeing 4 count in range 0 to 5. It's 2 lines of code versus 4 lines, right? So
yeah, that's why I was saying this is a weird example, because you're like, oh, I can accomplish that here, but we know that this is going to end at 5. So we don't know. Well, again, this is a terrible example of a while loop, because a while loop is used. This is rewriting this as a while loop, but a while loop is used when we don't know when this condition is going to be hit.
Okay, and we couldn't put a variable in that 5, which may satisfy that mystery condition and kind of give us the same tool. Can you put a variable in range parentheses and like? No. Okay.
Oh well, yeah, you could, because you could have
you
like
said
your
X
length of whatever. But I think it actually
right.
Your variable would have to be of type integer in order to do that.
Okay, yeah. I get it.
Does that make sense?
Then, yes, it does. Can you scroll up just back up to the objects real fast? So right here, dictionaries, but right here it says with these methods and these keys, capitals.keys, capitals.values, capitals.items. Is this not what John was talking about with the dot notation?
So no, the dot note. This is a built-in method on a dictionary. So
okay.
Default,
keys, values, items. Gotcha.
This data type of dictionary has built in the same way that like length, right? Length is a built-in method for a list. Looks a little bit different, but it's a built-in method, right? You didn't write the code that allows us to go and count how many things are in my list, right? That's just a built-in thing that Python provides. So same thing here. This is just this dot blank is a built-in method that comes on dictionaries. Great question.
We went over methods in HTML and I just completely forgot about
it. Yeah, all good. And we're going to be going over built-in. There's a lot of built-in stuff that you can use when you kind of get into programs, or like with Django, there's some built-in stuff. So yeah. All comes with time, my friends. I promise you. Cool. Now, the only other thing I wanted to hit on for tonight, because we're going a little bit long, so I want to make sure that we are doing all right. 2 things. We have functions with default parameters. A function, I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. It's very simple in the sense of we all have done this. You've done this a million times. Instead of the word function, thank goodness, because I can never spell it right. That's why I love Python. Instead of the word function, like we used in JavaScript to declare a function, all you do is just type def. DEF declares that there's a function. This is the function name. And if we have parameters, you just pass them in right there. And instead of the curly bracket, like we are used to seeing, you just do a colon. Now, Python is wildly important. This is wildly important. And you know, when I said a while loop, that was the most important thing? Scratch that. The most important thing with Python is indentation. Because we don't use those curly brackets, which helped us with a function, right? Say like, okay, this is the beginning of my function. Everything within the curly brackets is my function. Because Python doesn't have that, it goes off of indentation. That's probably my least favorite part of Python, but it totally goes off of the indentation that we have. So here in this method, anything indented under this method, Python will treat and act as if it is part of the method, of the function. So what do I mean by that? So if I go to my code, so I say something like this. And then I say, return X. Well, I don't want to say return X. I want to say print. Right? If I do something like this, because this is all indented under this function, Python treats it all as if this is part of the function. So yes, Jordan, instead of curly braces, Python uses indentation to identify what is part of a function. Absolutely nail on the head. That is wildly important. If you don't do that, let's say I had this here, then my function will run. X will equal a plus b. It will print hello world. C will equal 8. And then nothing will happen because it sees this return outside of my function. It'll eventually get to here, right? It'll eventually get to here once this function's done. But let's say it was like some sort of conditional check. And then if that's the case, I want to, if they're not logged in, I want to return them to my login screen. If they are logged in, I want to take them to the dashboard, right? Something like that. With that, because this is not indented, this return is not technically part of this method. Now, if I go here, everybody's happy, and now it is part of that method. So indentation is, again, just like Jordan said, way to put it. Instead of curly braces, Python is using indentation to identify what is part of the function. That is the most crucial thing about Python, so please, please, please hear that. Cool. Just like JavaScript, you can call your function anywhere, right? So I can say add somewhere else. I can now just say add, and then I just have to pass in 2 numbers, right? Because it's expecting 2 parameters. But it's very similar to, very, very, very similar to the way JavaScript is. Now, if my function hits a return, what happens? The minute my function hits a return.
The code ends or stops.
Yeah, it exits. Yeah,
reading it.
exactly. It's done. Yes. Nathan asked, are function methods that we define? Is that why you keep interchanging method and function? No, I'm sorry. This is a function. When we get to a class, then it's a really weird naming convention. When we get to our class, the functions associated with our class are called our class methods, if that makes sense. And it's pretty interchangeable. So this is a function because it's not associated to a class. But on Monday, when we talk about OOP and we create a class, and maybe we're going to create a person, right? And each person has maybe a name and an age and I don't know, favorite food. And then each person might have a method called walking, right? Where they print, I love to walk. So that is a function on my class. That is a method. So that's my fault. I should call this a function, and then a method is associated with a class. Great catch, Nathan.
Hey, Will.
Yeah.
Sorry. So if we could go back to that, yeah. If we don't indent the return, and if we just do the return under the def, what's the difference will be the output?
Yeah. So let's say, I mean, right now there's 2 things that'll happen, right? So X is defined within my function, and we kind of talked about scope in JavaScript, but X only lives within this function, right? It's a scope thing. Now, if I were to define X up here, and I said X equals A plus B, or to do this, then there's no issues, right? Well, but it doesn't know what A plus B is, so there is an issue. Now, let me go back. This will run this function. And then if we're going top to bottom, it will run this function. and then it will, if this was all within like a method called like, do math, then it would have run it top to bottom. But here, because this is defined and this is just a function, if I call add, 3 plus 4, right? Well, what happens is A, add 3 plus 4 is not going to give me anything, but B, it never gets to this code, right? Because it only runs the function when the function is called. So it doesn't come up here and then keep going and rerunning all my code. So that is not ever read, or it's read at the beginning, right? Because this is the same thing as saying this, right? Just a random return X. And it's like, well, what am I returning that doesn't make sense? There is nothing to return. A, it doesn't know what X is, but B, it's like your code's running top to bottom. It sees a function and it goes, okay, great, I'll save that for later. And then it gets here and it goes, well, I don't know what that means. So that's why that would be an issue. When we get to actually, like in our Django, you'll see when we create our kind of what is called our views, we create our functions in our views, you'll see that we'll have more things that will prevent that return from actually being something. So right now, I guess more so think about it like, remember, code reads top to bottom. So it reads this user, cool, I save that for later. Then it reads this function, saves it for later, right? And then this function is its own thing. Let's say I did that. Then it's going to randomly read just this line called return X, and it's saying what does that mean? There's not a function that's returning. That means nothing to me. So that's why indentation on this in this certain example is really important, because now if it's indented, I call this, it can actually return something. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you. Actually, when I was doing the assignment for function intermediate, so I realized that like because of just one indentation, I had the code wasn't working. And
yeah,
I was
indentations. That's usually your bug. So always check your indentation. There's a cool thing called indent rainbow, and you can see how like if an indentation goes, it's like different colors, and so it allows you to kind of really see. Like, oh, okay, these are all on the same. It's called indent rainbow. Yeah, it's just an extension. Indent rainbow by Otterwatt. It's a great one. It just kind of gives you more code. Yeah, of course. Nathan had a great point. No, it actually wouldn't. No, outside of the function, it doesn't do what it's doing, or it doesn't do what it's supposed to. That's why it was generating an error, because it's returning, but it's like, what's returning? Returning what? I don't know. Cool. Now there's something called a default parameter. So in our function here, we just have these parameters that our users pass in. But what if I wanted to add another parameter that just said like repeat equals 2 or something like that? It can also do what we call a default parameter, where I just write in a value. So my user who calls this function doesn't have to pass in anything for repeat, because by default, repeat will always equal 2. So that's just called a default parameter. So if I want to make sure that no matter what, a value is passed, now I could also pass in that and it will overwrite that. But by default, it will be by 2. So my user doesn't actually have to pass that in. That's just a default, pretty simple. You will never use it. Well, right now you won't in what we're doing with Django, but it's just something really cool to kind of know, is that by default, you can call that and then say, you know, the name equals this. Cool. Last thing I want to talk about, we're going a little bit over time. Not a little bit, a lot of bit over time. Last thing I want to talk about are just kind of your conditional statements. Now it's pretty high up there. We've already talked about if statements a lot. The only thing that's different between these are the way that they're worded, and it's the else if. So instead of an else if, you just write elif. That's the only difference. Just as a reminder, these if statements are chains, meaning that if the minute one of them becomes true, so if this first condition is true, then these other two conditions are never read. The chain is broken and it's never read. So yeah, elif, and then again, it follows the same indentation. So your indentation is huge in Python. So if something, instead of having the curly brackets, it just has the indentation. And then once that indentation is done, that says, okay, that's the done of my if statement. That is it. Any questions on kind of these? One thing I do want to point out that we kind of talked about in office hour today is you can actually have more than one condition. So let's say I want to say if x is greater than 10 and x is greater than 20, print bigger than 10 and 20. And the way you would do that is these right here. You would just say and or you can do something like equals, like if it equals that or does not equal. So here are these two. So if you wanted more than one condition, just like this, so 1 is less than or equal to 2 and 2 is less than or equal to 3, I want to say true, right? That's going to give me true. So that is a way that you can do and or. In JavaScript, it's 2 and signs, and or is 2 lines. But here in Python, we just put the word and or the word or. But other than that, it's the same thing as you have with JavaScript, other than it's now elif instead of else if, and you do indentation versus curly brackets. Any question on conditional statements? Nathan asked from that default variable, we can set any variable to a default value, right? Doesn't have to be repeat. Yeah, 100%. You can set any variable. That was just something I wanted to show.
Can you trail on your ands inside of your if statements forever? Can I say if this and that and that and that and that is true?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, and it'll only happen if all of those are true.
Right.
Yeah, I believe so. If check Python.
I guess same question with the or.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh. So you would do something like this. You would have your condition 1 and slash or this, and you'd have another thing. So yeah. Yeah. So if this and this and this.
So that would have to be written out that way. You couldn't put if and then another if statement below that, because if that first if was true, that would stop the chain.
Yeah, so the minute it sees another if, so if you had if and then this said if, then that's a different chain. So then this will start again. So there's no differentiation, like they're not associated. You can have multiple if statements, right? But if you just keep doing ifs, then it's going to read every single one of them, and there's right.
Okay,
yeah, it's going to read every single one of them. Yeah, but it looks like, so the way you want to do it is you say if blank and blank in parentheses and blank and blank. So you can have a bunch. You just have to combine 2 of them, 2 different conditions with an and in parentheses, and then you can add more. And or would be the same thing. Yeah, actually, you don't even have to. You just do if, and you can add them all together in one parentheses. You're good to go. Cool. There's a couple of questions in chat. Yes, Jordan. So Jordan asked, so elif chains in the same way. So like here, right? We're looking at this example. If first is true, it doesn't go to any elif. That's correct. So the minute this one becomes true, it skips all 3 of these and goes on to the next line's code. It's called breaking the chain. Mm-hmm.
But you could put continue in there, right? You could put continue underneath, like within that elif.
Yeah, if you wanted to. Or break, right? You have those two. But just from a
Does the
from like
continue
a-
and break, does that apply to the if chain, or does that exit out of like a higher
there
loop?
might be a for loop, yeah. Let's see. So I know I talked about that right here. I think that's actually just in loop, sorry. This is loop control, yeah. This whole thing on the platform talks about breaking. The control flow is typically a conditional as well. Like when I was teaching on like Go for Microsoft, Go's control flow included if. So I'm curious to see if Python. And you're right, it'll just do the innermost. So it's just a scope thing. So it'll go still to the next one. Oh no, so it says the continue statement rejects or skips all the remaining in the current iteration and continues normal execution at the top. So that's a loop though. So like an if that's the case, then it wouldn't go to the top and go to a new iteration, right? It would either the condition is true or not. So the continue would be in your for loop and the breaks would be in your loop as well. Break is like, instead of having just like an else do something, you could just break and it breaks out of that. Continue says instead of even printing, it would just go up. It doesn't print the value. It skips whatever's next in my for loop and goes back up, and then I becomes in, but you don't see an I here. Any other questions, friends? We are officially an hour and a half. Usually like to never go more than this. Any other quick questions though?
I guess I have one with the way that Python values indentation. Back up at the top where we had like a dictionary and a huge list of things that kind of looked more like that CSS layout. Do we? I would assume we still need the commas because of the syntax.
Yeah, you absolutely need the commas, but indentation is for like if you're running a for loop or you have a function or you have an if statement, not for like if you created a list,
array or
right?
something.
And something like that.
Okay.
If you have like a list or a dictionary, that's fine. It's just a way, instead of, you can kind of think about it like, well, a dictionary is weird because it has a curly brackets, but in JavaScript, any kind of function or conditional statement that we use the curly brackets to kind of hold, like, okay, this is part of my for loop, or this is part of my function, or this is part of my if statement. Anything you use there, obviously excluding dictionaries, that's where the indentation really comes in. So great question though. It's a really good question. Any other questions? What I'll quickly do is post my code to GitHub so you guys can see it. So I need to navigate also on the Google Sheet. Just really want to point out, I created an entire GitHub thing. So if you guys, it's just on the helpful links, it's there for you. So if you need that, go for it. So I'm going to navigate to my project folder. I'm going to go a little bit quicker because I know where it's at. I know it's in my desktop. I know it's in instruction. I know it's in June. I've got only one thing called week 1. And there I have lecture 2. Cool. So I've got that. Now my code is saved. All is well. Actually going to enter out of my code. It doesn't matter if you're in or out. All I'm going to do is git init. I'm going to initialize my repository. Perfect. I'm going to say git add space period. Again, that space period is I want to add everything. If you want to, for good measure, you can say git status, make sure that these are green. Okay, all is well. It's going to add my main.py, daily agenda, my JSON. Then I just say git commit. And lecture on loops. Conditionals and other fun things. Perfect. Cool. So I created it. Now I head over to GitHub. I'm going to say Python week 1, lecture 2, like I did the last one. That's just my repository name. A good idea, again, is have your project name. All I need to do is make sure that this public is clicked. I don't need to do anything else. I don't need to add a description for right now. All good. Then I create my repository. Cool. So again, we've already created our repository on the command line. This is what we just did right here. So I just have to run these 3. It would behoove you to copy and paste this one. Now, the keyboard shortcuts does work in Mac. If you are on a Windows, you might have to right click. Then I'm actually just going to copy and paste all this because it's literally easier. It brings me. Push you origin me. Cool. So I've done it. Now, if I refresh my code, you can see all my code, all the different things that we did. And all you have to do is copy this and put it on the Learn platform. And then you can see that message, lecture on loops, conditionals, and other fun things, all right there. That's it. I'll always make sure that I push my code at the end. And then if you guys want it, I guess you can have it written chat. But that way you guys can get used to it, really get used to it, challenge yourself. It is important to know that. If there's nothing else, I'm going to go ahead and hop off. I hope you guys have a wonderful night. I'm still working, so
Thanks, Will.
yeah, of course. If you need anything on Discord, I'm working today and tomorrow as well, always. So feel free to reach out with anything. I hope you guys have a wonderful night, and you're excited for object-oriented programming next week. It's gonna be awesome, and we're diving in head first. Today was a lot. Great job. See you guys.
I actually have some issue with my GitHub.